future-ready visionaries of new tomorrows. This is Navjeet Kandola, and I am so excited to welcome our guest today, Elizabeth Kucinich. She is an incredible person. She is someone who follows her heart. She loves peace, and she is committed to creating change in the world. And not only committed to creating change in the world, she is somebody who follows that belief, that way of being from the inside out. I'm going to share a little bit of her bio with you today. She is a British organic food and vegan advocate. She's a champion for peace, animals and the environment. She is the Director of Policy at the Centre for Food Safety, producer of 2 documentaries, Hot Water and GMO OMG, that's definite, and a socially conscious business owner. She is married to former 8-term congressman, U.S. congressman, and 2-time presidential candidate, Dennis Kucinich. She splits her time between Ohio, Cleveland, and Washington, D.C. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be with you.
Thank you. So before we go into our conversation about food and the future of food, I would love for our viewers to have a little bit of a sense of your journey and the experiences that have created this incredible musculature that you have for advocacy and being such a caring, peace-loving person in the world.
Well, sort of going back, really, my mother was my inspiration, and I often joke with Dennis and I say, was I predestined to do what I'm doing? Was I pre-programmed? Because when I think about it, much of what I was doing in my childhood is what I'm doing the grown-up version of now. So when I was sort of 4 or 5, my mum actually sadly almost died, which is not sadly, but sadly is that she was ill, but she almost died from Crohn's disease.
Oh, wow.
And, she would eat and the weight wouldn't stay on, and I just watched my mother shrink down and sort of become someone who was continually in pain. And the hospitals would say, well, the only thing they could advocate was a very awful surgery, removing large sections of her intestines. And she said, no, I think there's got to be another way. And she started to study whole food nutrition. She changed her diet. She became vegetarian to get better, and she became a vibrant person. But from understanding that nutrition and food were the path to true health, we started to look at other things. So I often find that food is an avenue for something greater. And we became aware of all the different animal issues to do with intensive animal agriculture. And she encouraged me very much to lobby Parliament and to do demonstrations and all different kinds of things. So from about the age of 8, that's what I was doing. And by the time I was in my mid-teens, I actually would wag schools so that I could go and lobby Parliament. And I just remember one particular day I had gone round at my school, and I had gone to the head teacher's office, and I said, could you print out 500 letters? How much would that cost? And then I went to a stationery shop and I budgeted how much it would cost to buy the envelopes and all of those kinds of things. And I printed out a letter for every member of Parliament, and hand-signed and wrote them this message, and then tried to spend a couple of days actually distributing these letters. And that single act actually got me to meet a number of very prominent members of Parliament who greatly encouraged me on my journey to truly take this activism forward. And so that was as a young schoolgirl. And sort of moving forward, I would see people like Mother Teresa and Princess Diana, particularly when Princess Diana visited India. And, it was a wonderful time that the British press actually covered the plight of humanity in countries such as that. And then I thought, right, as soon as I'm finished school and I'm free, I'm going to buy a ticket and go to India. So that's exactly what I did. And at the ripe old age of 18, I bought myself a ticket and went off on my own and knocked on the door of a Missionaries of Charity home, which was Mother Teresa's ladies, and worked there for 3 months. I used to go in every single day, and at night I actually lived in the slums in Agra, so just by the Taj Mahal. And so I got to experience this incredible journey of service and what you get from when you serve and volunteer, but also immense challenges as well as a single woman who's very young and has never actually travelled abroad on her own. That it was an extraordinary time. But those kinds of experiences have really shown me that when you give, you receive so much more. When you give from your heart, your energy just opens, and the universe literally puts so many amazing things in front of you. And my own personal philosophy about sort of success and moving forward is luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And the real luck is actually having your eyes open and being able to receive what is put in front of you and be able to use it for its higher good. And so that's what I try to do.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. How do you then take that kind of outlook and connect it to GMO and food? I mean, this is a pretty huge subject that we're going to talk about today, and a lot of people are aware of it, probably because of the kind of work that you do and other people in this cause. Tell us a little bit about what is GMO and why should we be concerned about it?
Well, GMO as a technology is where a seed or an organism of some kind is manipulated and something is done to it so that it's not how it would be naturally. So there's two types of GMO that have been deregulated at the moment in the country, and they have two types of traits. So it's either pesticide producing or herbicide resisting. So the technology or the chemical companies have taken the plant's ability to produce some kind of pesticide, ramped it up, put it inside corn, and then now we're actually eating something that is regulated as a pesticide, not so much as a food.
Wow.
So that's one side of it. There's not the longitudinal studies to tell us whether it's good or bad, whether there is, well, obviously there's got to be higher levels of toxicity, but whether there are long-term effects and things, because the government actually does not require that. There's a special statute called generally recognized as safe, and so it just gets shunted in through that.
Right.
That's the pesticide producing. The herbicide resisting is where the plant develops a trait so that it can be sprayed with herbicide, and in this case it's called glyphosate or Roundup, which is what we can buy at Home Depot or something that people may spray in their weeds in their garden, which I please don't do that. And so Roundup is now being sprayed on plants, and if you think a herbicide kills plants, and so to be eating a plant that is resistant to that means that we're actually eating herbicides because it was designed to tolerate chemical applications. Mm-hmm. So we are eating increasing amounts of chemicals. Mm-hmm. So there is a question about safety and allergens and all of those kinds of things. But for me, it's really about the environment. And these crops, even though industry will say the reason why they're being developed is to increase yields, or it's to withstand climate, or it's to do some other wonderful thing. The actual thing that it's done is to increase the amount of chemicals that are used in agriculture. So there's a joint vision here. One is really to reclaim true organic, biodiverse agriculture, which is the way of the world moving forward. Because at the moment that when we look at GMOs, they're massive monoculture crops, acres and acres, miles and miles, as far as the eye can see, of the same crop. And of course, when you grow like that, you're not rotating, you're not changing the dynamic of the environment, you're not encouraging wildlife, you're not allowing for biodiversity, which actually stops a lot of the potential hazards coming forward. So if you've got one big monoculture crop, and a disease that comes in that kills that monoculture crop, you're in a precarious situation. When you have a lot of seed diversity, then you're able to not grow that tomato anymore, or grow a different one, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so I want to see, obviously, a reduced amount of chemicals being put on the land. We have polluted our groundwater. If you go to Iowa, the groundwater is shot. We've degraded our soils, so, over just a short period of time, the soil fertility is completely down. We're losing our topsoils. And human health is really very, very bad, because when we look at what these GMOs actually feed, they're creating high fructose corn syrup for human consumption, or they're feed for animals that are in animal factories, or they're fueling our cars. So they're not actually really feeding us.
Right.
And now 53% of the world's food supply, or the 53% of the world's seed supply, which obviously equates to food, is actually in the hands of 5 corporations. And so we're seeing not only the devastating effects of chemicals and the potential threats of monoculture and the increased activities of destruction for the environment, but we're also seeing a corporate hold on agriculture and food systems.
I think that's an important point that you're bringing up about that. 53% of the seeds are in the hands of 5 corporations. What does that mean? From what I remember when I was a youngster growing up in India, observing the green revolution that happened with Indira Gandhi and the introduction of pesticides, herbicides, lots of fertilizer, was that yes, we did have a higher yield. Instead of having 1-2 crops a year, you were maybe able to produce 3 crops a year. Was that the downside was that what I saw and my family witnessed was that there was a change in the landscape. That we saw that there was a decrease in the number of birds and insects, because birds eat insects, insects eat the seeds, and the birds eat the seeds. And so it was a really interesting shift that was happening. And also, I'm sure you heard about the suicides that some of the Indian farmers are committing because of these GMO companies insisting that they only buy their seed and that they cannot reuse those seeds. Is that correct? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've got a chemical company that really the true motivation, from what I see from what we're really seeing literally in the fields, is a chemical company that goes into seeds. Then you patent the seeds. You have to continually sell the seeds to the farmers. A big sack of seeds has gone from $50 a sack to around $350, $400. It's an enormous amount of money, and you obviously need a lot of seeds to plant a field. And then the inputs that go with it, obviously the bread and butter of the chemical company. So it's a phenomenal business model from their point of view. You think of Bill Gates and what he's done with Microsoft and the amount of money he's managed to make from patenting a little bit of technology that then goes into all of our computers. Imagine what it is to patent food and life in itself. So it's a real challenge. But on the flip side of that, we truly see... well, you mentioned actually the green revolution and how there were increased crop rotation and things, that we haven't actually calculated true cost of this industrial agriculture. Right. Because when you have all of those inputs, then how much more efficient or less efficient is that system? We're at peak oil at the moment, and all of those inputs, like the chemicals and the fertilizers, are primarily fossil fuel based. So we're at peak oil, so that's a big challenge for agriculture. We're at peak water. These crops are extremely reliant upon water, as is the industrial animal agriculture process. It's extremely water intensive. And those two minor but major areas actually are what we need to be looking at. And when you look at organic agriculture, and organic being the baseline of no chemicals, no antibiotics, and all of those kinds of things. But added to that, a broader definition, which is what we actually want to create, of truly sustainable, so appropriate scale, with workers' rights, with welfare for animals and biodiverse, all of those elements added together, we can truly have a system of agriculture that really feeds the world and is not reliant upon so many more inputs that we actually won't be able to be using in the next potentially 50 years. So the kind of agricultural system that we're advocating and that so many people on the ground are actually eating at the moment anyway, I mean, you look at the vast proportion of the world already eats in this way, in a non-GMO way, because they're farmers. That this is the way to go. And what we should be doing is giving money for research to increase efficiencies for organic clean food rather than toxic food and technology in the way that it seems to be heading at the moment.
It's interesting as you're talking about that. The thought that keeps coming into my mind is, because I'm so future oriented sometimes, and I do love technology, I have to say, is that it makes me think about that cup of tea, the Earl Grey, that when they're on Star Trek, that they can just order and it kind of dispenses the tea and it just makes it out of atoms and molecules. I wonder, how can I marry the organic with the the kind of the convenience of like instant, like I'm thinking of, oh yes, I'd like fish and chips, or I'd like a salad, and the way that people like Ray Kurzweil talk about creating this assembler that takes the atoms and rearranges them and creates a salad for you. What do you think about that? Like in terms of the future, are we going to be connected to the land? Can we have a future where we can go off into the stars and still be organic? Is there a way to marry technology and being organic, being conscious and aware, and all of these?
So organic is not backward by any means. Organic is very forward. Working with the earth. So getting increased yields and productivity and working with the biodiversity and supporting all life systems, and really acknowledging and embracing how the amazing symbiotic relationships that occur between plants and microorganisms in the soil, for example, and how that affects climate and the amount of carbon sequestration that happens when we have healthy soils. Mm-hmm. Very, very simple things, but we can really, the earth has been going for quite some time now, and there's been this tremendous balance, and it's us who's throwing it out of balance. Mm-hmm. It's not accurate to say that we can either have a forward-thinking technological future or we can have an earth-based backward future, because that's not the case at all. If we want to live as humanity or as star people or whatever it is that people perceive our existence to be, we need to be able to live on this planet and not toxically pollute it, so that generations to come can actually have healthy bodies. And what we're seeing in the United States, we have enormous amounts of disease that either comes directly as a result of the chemical pollutants in the environment themselves, or from the toxic product of food that comes out from the processed food and junk that people are eating. Mm-hmm. So either way, we need to evolve our consciousness about what food is, and also the role that it plays within our lives and our futures. I work in food because I feel that it connects everything that I'm passionate about, and it's immediate. Yeah. So your immediate instant gratification of, pressing the 3D printer button and out pops whatever it is that you want. Well, I feel that with food as an activist. So very often as activists and advocates for issues, we're asking some big behemoth of a company or a government structure to change and become better in the way that we see it, and it takes forever and we lose energy because we're trying to push something that's massive. With food, we get the opportunity to move agriculture every time we choose to eat, because our choices really are either putting money in the pockets of the people that are destroying things, or it's putting money in the pockets of people who are supporting things, or it's not putting money anywhere and you're growing it in your garden. But either way, you can choose to support your body, or you can choose something else. But food is enormous potential there for people.
Oh, I love that, because it circles the conversation right back to this sense of that you can feel powerful. Because one of the things I was thinking about is how we can feel powerless or helpless or overwhelmed when we look at the corporations or the behavior of governments, and we think, well, what difference can I make? But in this one instance,
we make an enormous difference.
We can make an enormous difference. And I think from what I'm getting from you and being inspired by what you're saying is that, for people like me who want a certain kind of a technology, a star future, let's say, that perhaps the way we envision, the way that we see the future being represented can be changed. Instead of just seeing these, the image that we always see of spaceships, very streamlined, white, smooth surfaces, very kind of automated realities, but we very rarely see traveling, gardens growing on walls, Can
you imagine your spirit and your mind seriously if you're on a spaceship that was just white and strip lighting and machines? you
Exactly.
go crazy very, very quickly.
And
And
yeah.
we're actually seeing that in cities where children don't even know that a carrot comes from the ground or
Right.
what it actually
Yes.
starts at, or have never really put their hands in soil. That
Right.
loss of connection with truly where we're from is a real potential threat to our unstable psychology. So.
Yeah. So help us to vision some futures that you would love to see unfold for your future generations and for humanity. What does the future look like for you that you are really obviously committed to creating? What visions do you have of the future that you'd love to see unfold?
Well, obviously, the unfolding of all positive human potential that's supported by agriculture that truly supports the planet and supports people's health. So it is agriculture that does respect those symbiotic relationships that I talked about. In very specific terms, we reduce and cut out the chemicals. We put our money and resources into developing the cutting-edge organic technologies. I'm on the board of the Rodale Institute, for example, the oldest organic research institute in the country. It dates back to the 1940s. They've been doing farm systems trials for the last 35 years for conventional, which is normal chemicals, next to organic, and then for the last 8 or 9 years next to GMOs, and really seeing what the effects are on the land and productivity and all of those kinds of things. And what we see is the amazing potential with organic of where we feel so terribly disempowered and disheartened with climate change and all of the things that are happening. If we were to look at the soil and truly just focus on soil, one thing, and we bring the soil back to health, we bring the microbiology of the soil back to standards, have all farmers have microscopes instead of dumping chemicals on the land, truly understand those relationships in the soil, we will be able to actually sequester an enormous amount of carbon that could potentially take us back to pre-industrial levels. And many scientists have written about this, and that's just looking at soil, that's not looking at anything else. I would love for people to be truly conscious in the way that they are in the world. It's not that you have to take on the burdens of the world, but I found that through the avenue of food that you can reach really good health, obviously, and I don't mean that you have to eat perfectly, but it's good to know what's good for you and to really, when you're ingesting something, truly be conscious about what it is that you're taking into your body, because as my husband said, what you are what you eat, and then you should know what you're eating in order to know what you're going to become. And I think that just that small awareness really does help people to gain power in their own emotions, in their own physical bodies, and in their own potential moving forward. So food for me is absolutely essential to everything. And for people to be conscious about that, for our agricultural systems to reflect our consciousness, to respect the ecosystem that there is, and really see that there's a different opportunity moving forward. Dan Barber, who is a chef, he did an amazing TED talk. It was about a fish that he fell in love with, and he was talking about sustainable fish, and this was how it was raised. And anyway, he then went to Spain and truly found a place that was raising fish sustainably. And this was all about a scientist who had understood the relationship between the birds and the waters and the fish, and they never stopped the fisheries. The fish would breed, but about 30% of the fish was actually eaten by birds that would come. It's one of Northern Europe's largest bird sanctuaries, even though it is a fishery. Water that comes in from the river is polluted, and when it comes out, it's much purer. Well, normally when we look at farmed fish, it causes an enormous amount of pollution, and so all of this way of really understanding how our ecosystem works and then using it in a farming setting is extraordinary, and that is where we should be putting our resources. What we find at the moment is that the government subsidizes monocultures, it's subsidizing row crops like GMOs, and we're not truly seeing as how much our food is really costing us.
Right. And from that, what I get is that when somebody, a scientist or somebody with resources and a will, uses technology and consciousness, that we can. I mean, it's not so out of our hands. I mean, the planet can feel topsy-turvy, but really it's not out of our hands. I mean, there are more of us than there are officials and heads of corporations.
Absolutely.
I mean, if we're looking at the statistics of power, we do have power in terms of how we buy, how we spend, right?
Absolutely.
And so I think part of that shift in consciousness is recognizing that we do make a difference, that we are making a difference. And like you did as an 8-year-old, you took action. You took action. You wrote those individual letters. I mean, I'm feeling very inspired by this, that people can make a difference once they recognize that the scales are not tilted. I mean, that's partly something that we have bought into, that we're powerless. Right? The media kind of makes it that way. We believe it that way. It's convenient to believe that because it means that we don't have to do anything. But really, the scales we don't have to view the scales like that, as out of balance, and that we are powerless.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, some people get very angry and come at trying to change the world with force and just with frustration. But truly, if you really embody living what it is that you're, or trying your best, none of us are perfect by any means, but really trying your best to live as well as you can, that really makes all the difference. And society is made up of individuals, and individuals make the collective, and our representatives are meant to represent us, and we should be getting involved in every election campaign that is appropriate, and voting for what we want, not what the media is telling us that we want, or that it is viable. Right. I mean, there is this grand illusion, and there is this brainwashing. People buy into that. Welcome to the sirens of Washington. It's in a constant state of emergency here.
Yes.
But there is only power in individuals. That's where it comes from. Mm-hmm. And if we decide that we elect a dictator and then we never engage with a government structure for 4, 8, 12, forever, whatever years, of course they're going to do whatever it is they want to do. I advocate in Congress, and it's so powerful when you go into a representative's office and you say, okay, I'm advocating on this issue, but how many of your constituents have made phone calls or written to you or sent an email or something? And they really take note of how many and who. Mm-hmm. And so every communication really matters. And part of this whole thing is, and it is a big responsibility when you truly wake up to consciousness, you realize that you are actually responsible. You can't switch off and go, oh, it's just all too big, and nobody cares about me. Mm-hmm. That is the default thing that's very easy for the individual to be very, very lazy and just, be complacent and be happy moaning. And, we want to all come together and truly be active and joyfully do it. Yeah. It's so empowering to do it.
So tell me, is talking about the future and painting a picture, what would a day in your life look like where there's organic food, there's symbiotic relationships with nature and animals? What would your daily life look like? What would accomplishing all of this and creating this, what would you be doing?
What would I do?
Yeah, what would you be doing on a daily basis? Do you go for walks? Do you practice yoga? Do you do some teaching? Like, I want our listeners and viewers to begin to be able to vision realities where things can be in a wonderful state of nourishment and peace and harmony. So tell us a version of one of those worlds.
Well, I think if any of us has been lucky enough to go into the countryside and to be surrounded by the magic of life, that's what I would like to do. So I'd love to leave the city. I'd love to have my own farm. Mm-hmm. I'd love to go off and produce 1 million babies and just be happy and relaxed and not feel like I have to play a role in the world. But as it is, I don't have children, and I'm just in Washington and trying to drudge away at really trying to get this system shifted. Yeah. But in my life, I would just like to sort of hands off and
yes. That's a really important place, or a challenging place for a lot of us, is that balance between feeling that by becoming an activist, an advocate, that we want to engage, and so there's it takes energy and awareness, and then there's another part of the self that just wants to be in nature, raise a family, and do it that way.
Be
Human,
yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's something that keeps coming to me more and more is, okay, that's what you want. Now, what would it look like to just start living like that? Just turn it around. And you know, that the world is going to be topsy-turvy, maybe for a while yet. You know, people are learning, there's evolutions of consciousness that are happening. And so the question, the challenge that I keep finding myself, and I think my answer at the moment seems to be, live the life that you want to lead. Meaning like, okay, each day, do that. If you want to really, Navjeet, if you want to go for a walk today this morning before you interview Elizabeth, do that, which I did. But, you know, just to kind of like, what would it mean if we all actually began to live those futures that we dream about?
Yeah. Well,
how do you balance
sirens
that?
again.
That's okay.
So
exactly, I can see why you want to be out in the country.
well, I love the life that I have. I mean, I truly do. I'm so blessed, and I'm thrilled. You know, I really worked to get here, and really, you know, I feel like as a child, I had this vision of what it is that I wanted and needed to do, and you know, not to sound wacky or anything, but I felt like I was born to do something, and I think so many of us feel like we're born to do something, and some of us are lucky enough to actually embrace that and make it happen. And other people put their dreams to the side. So I agree, people should live their dreams, and so, you know, I am really happy where I am, but at the same time, sometimes I do dream of switching off. And
and I think it can be, we can have several dreams that we're kind of creating at the same time, and also, as you were saying, you know, looking at what you're putting into your body, listening to that, because that does change the vibration of your cells. You know, if you're eating food that's locally grown, that's organic, it's just been in the soil a day ago or something, and now here it is in your body. I definitely feel the difference when I eat locally grown organic food from the market versus something that's organic but may have been grown somewhere else and packaged and so on and so forth. I mean, I just like to do little experiments and see, can I really feel the difference? The food that I eat that's just locally grown, it just feels so much more alive and bigger and more, I don't know, spacious or something. And so is there a way that we can kind of be that way in our lives, allow the food to nourish us, and imagine and create futures that we can be proud of, that we can leave as a legacy for our children?
Absolutely. And you know, they're happening all the time. There's so many amazing initiatives and incredible ways that people are living right now. And if I just think of Washington, D.C., I met with an amazing organization called DC Greens that are working with schools that now have a school garden to market program. So the schools are actually producing the organic vegetables and selling them to the parents and to the community, and really, you know, looking at how these systems are working and bringing pollinators back. So having honeybees as part of that, increasing yields of fruit trees, and you know, all of it is obviously interconnected, and it's all very joyful. And if we just look at the projects that are happening in our cities, we'll be able to see that there's some amazing people out there who are making this vision possible.
That's such a great idea. That's such a great idea for people watching or listening. Look within your communities and see what projects are flourishing or starting, just to feel encouraged. Like, wow, there is good stuff happening. There are food, farm to table organizations and farms and initiatives in schools, so that we can feel encouraged, like it isn't all doom and gloom, but there are alternatives. And I think that's the cool thing about the human spirit is that the good does sprout. It does sprout in us, and it makes us take action, and it feels good, like you said at the beginning, that when you are of service and you open, what you receive is so nourishing from being of service. So even if you are an advocate and you have this kind of openness and embracing energy versus being exclusive, those are the bad guys, I'm the good guy, then you can actually grow and feel much more nourished and not so bitter and burnt out.
Yeah, and we mustn't think in dichotomized ways. We're all part of the human family, and we all have challenges, even within our own relationships. It's not if we talk about world peace, we have to bring it straight back into our relationships and start there first.
Right.
Same is true of sustainability and the way that we manage our own day-to-day lives. And my mother always said, if we all just looked after our own little corner of land and our own little family unit, then we would be able to, like, if everybody did that, then, you know, the world would be a very different place. And of course, she's not someone who only looks after her own little corner. She's someone who looks after the community as well. After her journey of self-healing, she opened a complementary healing and teaching sanctuary just outside London. And so now she really, you know, helps to support everybody else in getting their own energetic strength too.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about the two movies that you have produced, Hot Zone and GMO OMG, so that our viewers can look for them, watch them, support you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So Hot Water, the website is zerohotwater.com, and we've been looking at actually radioactive contamination of our groundwater across the United States, a really extraordinary issue that people don't really know about, and I didn't know about until the director approached me at one point and told me all about it. It was absolutely extraordinary. The film covers 10 states. Primarily, we're in the Southwest. We also go to Virginia and other places, and look at how uranium mining and milling and also nuclear testing has affected our groundwater, and it's pretty devastating. And then GMO OMG is probably self-explanatory, but actually it's the most beautiful film. It's so heart-filled. I would recommend that everybody watch it, just because the story is actually the director and his family, and he has three children, and it's a journey of like really trying to work out what is it that I should be feeding my children and what are GMOs. And so, you know, it's working from the ground level and telling people what they are. We worked with some tremendous PhDs to make sure that everything's very fact-checked. It's very conservative in the facts, and so people can have great faith in it. But the story's wonderful, and it takes you right back into Earth and into looking at systems and also looking at the stars as well. So it's
cool.
Lovely film.
And that is available on DVD?
In July, it will be available in DVD. We've just finished our theatrical circuits. Yeah.
Fantastic. I have a couple of random questions for you, Elizabeth, just to kind of change up the subjects and the energy. So if you could come back, if once your body passes and you had a choice, would you come back to planet Earth? Would you come back and say, okay, I'm going to do another round? And if yes, what would you want to incarnate as? Would you come as a human, a male, a female, a tree? What would you love to come back as?
Well, my first answer would be I would only want to come back if the planet was able to sustain me. If the human population and all of the animal populations had burgeoned out of control, then no, I would be happy up sitting on a star somewhere. But if the planet could truly sustain me and you know, I wouldn't be too much of a burden, then I would take potluck. I would be absolutely open to whatever the universe said I should come back to, because I'm sure it would be extraordinary, whatever it was. There's a documentary that I absolutely love. It's called Microcosmos, and it's got no words at all. It's just set to music, and it's looking at insect life, and fascinating. I mean, it would be really interesting to come back as something that really, as now I have no consciousness of.
Right. Well, you know, I mentioned Ray Kurzweil earlier, and there is this idea that hopefully they think at some point that we would be able to upload our consciousness to a computer or a drive or something, and then download it into a robot or a fish or something. Would that something like that interest you, do you think?
No, because if we're reincarnated, there's a bit of us from the past in the next body as well, so I don't think you would need to do that.
It's interesting. It's interesting as an idea, because if, let's say, your body's failing and you could just go onto a hard drive and then just be, you know, have a machine or a fish that you can swim in, or a bird that you could fly in. I think I would probably try that just to see what it would be like, because if your body's going to die, and you could say, okay, I'll try it for 5 minutes just to see if I'd like it. I think it would be an interesting proposition in terms of evolution and what it means to be human, because we're definitely becoming much more augmented, by machines, computers, devices. I mean, so many people these days are so tied to their phones and the social media that it would be like chopping off a limb for some people. So I think it's not far-fetched to imagine that some people might start, storing some of their data. We already do, our phone numbers and so on in clouds. That, I wonder what that kind of a future would look like sometimes. So I'd be intrigued by it.
Yeah, I still like the touchy-feely soft version myself.
I think it would be interesting to see how all of the whether the sensory would translate as you're flying. Would you really experience it as yourself, or would it be just like, a camera flying? Yeah. I don't know. Another question. I think
if someone has an evolved sense of an idea of some kind of an idea of reincarnation, that it naturally happens that way anyway. So,
well, that's what I think, that humans, whenever we create a technology that seems really advanced or incredible, I think it's an attempt of on some level to mimic what is available or we've experienced. It's within our consciousness, within our psyche, that we have a sense of that. Whether people are trying to communicate instantly or travel very quickly, those I think are just memories of teleportation or telepathy, or I think it's memories. I think we have cellular memories or yearning of being able to be all. I think that, and then we'll continue to create technologies that mimic those yearnings or try to satisfy those yearnings,
and then reduce our abilities to do it ourselves.
Yeah, I mean that's the interesting conversation. As you know, I'm definitely an advocate of using consciousness and really beginning to build those muscles and seeing, okay, what would it feel like, and to trust communication. Like, okay, if somebody needs to communicate to me, I can tune in. Of course, telephones help a lot, but there's also a way that we connect without listening to the world news or watching TV. We are connected, and I think that we just assume that in the past people didn't have as much access, but we don't know what kind of access and what the experience of that was for them. Yeah. Great, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today, and your wealth of knowledge and your inspiration and your ideas are invaluable, and I know that my people who are watching and listening are going to look for those films and hopefully begin to take action by connecting to the earth and feeling the soil, eating the food, being aware of what they're eating, and also not being afraid of being advocates. That they can be powerful in their own lives through very, very simple practices. Anything you would like to add to that before we finish?
Just if people want to learn more about different food issues, I'd love it if you'd visit the centerforfoodsafety.org.
Excellent.
I also write a blog regularly on Huffington, and there's one particular blog that I wrote about my mother. It's called My Mother, My Inspiration, which has some of my childhood story on there, which is really magical, and I think that that's really informed a lot of where I am today. And there's also a lot more policy stuff on there as well, which is interesting for people too. So.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth, and have a great day in Washington, D.C. I hope your energy and your peaceful energy will radiate out.
Thank you.
Thank you, and please give our love to Dennis. We'll be speaking to him in a couple of days, and we're looking forward to that.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.